Hi everybody, it's Justina Osowska, known as A Woman Blockchain on Twitter, and I'm here with Michael Kong, the CEO of Fantom. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, yeah. Thank you very much for having me here today.
Absolutely, absolutely. So why don't you tell the audience a little about Fantom's doing this year, what you're excited about?
Yeah, so like Fantom, for those of you that don't know, is one of these so-called layer 1 blockchain platforms, meaning that it's had its own chain. We have our own unique consensus, our own unique way of confirming transactions, what we call in an asynchronous manner, basically confirming multiple transactions at the same time, and it's connected to the Ethereum virtual machine stack. So the way that you deploy smart contracts on Ethereum pretty much works the same way as on Fantom. And what we've got planned for this year is quite a lot of technology development actually. So we're actively hiring more blockchain engineers, so more what we call core engineers to work on consensus and around transaction processing, and also engineers to work on changing the middleware. So basically finding new ways and better ways of processing smart contracts. So we've just hired recently 2 PhDs this month, and we're also hiring another PhD next month who are basically experts in programming languages and virtual machines. So there's a lot of technology improvements that are coming along to significantly increase the performance of the chain. And in addition to that, more on the business side, we've been talking to more governments in the Middle East and also Europe as well, so there could be some exciting announcements there. And also we're talking to a lot of projects in the space, even during this so-called down period in the market. There's been a lot of developments, particularly when it comes to gamify. So we've had a lot of gaming applications recently deployed on Fantom and actually get quite a lot of traction, so that's pretty exciting.
Awesome. So it's been a good conference for you at Consensus then?
Yeah, it's been pretty good. We managed to meet a lot of people. I think conferences like Consensus are really fantastic for everybody from around the world to basically come together in one location for a few days, mingle with one another, talk to one another, network and exchange details before you all fly back to where we're living at. So yeah, Consensus has been really great. It's been quite hot here, to be honest. Seems to be day in, day out. But apart from the heat, it's been a very nice environment.
That's great. So it sounds like you're going in a path where you're really looking at, like you're saying, the technology layer and really making improvements on that by hiring people who have that kind of education and focusing on the EVM aspect of things. And what do you think is driving that for yourself at this time?
For the Fantom Foundation, which I'm the CEO of, our primary objective is to build the underlying technology. So when it comes to the technology, you've got the core consensus layer, you've got the middleware layer that processes smart contracts, and on top of that, you've got the application layer that allows you to basically build smart contracts on top of the network via your usual API calls, RPC service, that sort of thing. So for us, technology is a really big focus. That to us will be a big differentiator between, say, Ethereum and other smart contract platforms out there. And the way that we're tackling it is uniquely by focusing also on not just the consensus, which a lot of people are focusing on, or layer 2s, but focusing on, say, the middleware development. So that's building a new way of executing smart contracts, because the current way of executing smart contracts is very inefficient, and there's no security checks at the actual lower level of executing smart contracts. So if you can find a way of finding bugs at the lower level, it gives you a lot more certainty as to that your smart contract isn't going to have bugs or isn't going to have issues that are of certain vulnerabilities. And also there's a lot of performance improvements that can be made to how you execute smart contracts. So our testing on the Ethereum virtual machine is that it basically slows down your network throughput by anywhere from about 90 to 95%. So if we're able to have a much more efficient smart contract engine, we could dramatically increase the throughput anywhere from 10 to 20 times. So this is a big research focus for ours. It's also part of my background in virtual machines and programming languages, where we did a lot of research at the University of Sydney as to actually how smart contracts execute, and we found a lot of improvements that can be made there.
Mm-hmm. And just for the audience, why do you think the smart contracts are so important in the ecosystem?
Because first and foremost, Fantom is known as a smart contract chain, as a generalized smart contract chain, and Ethereum itself is also a very massive smart contract chain, the biggest smart contract chain out of all the layer 1s that are out there. And the way that Ethereum got so big was to basically market itself as not being Bitcoin, where it's used primarily as a store of value or as a means of payment, but being used as as an engine where you can program a lot more functionality into it. So for example, you can program in like decentralized finance applications, NFTs, supply chain management, basically any sort of like P2P application you can code on the Ethereum chain, and you can also code the same on Fantom as well. So basically Ethereum and smart contract chains like Fantom dramatically expand the type of functionality that you get on a distributed ledger. So it used to be just with Bitcoin payments and store value, but now with smart contracts you have many more use cases. So that's why there's a big focus on how you execute smart contracts and how you do it in a very secure manner as well.
Understood. And so that's leading me into my next question, and it's about why do you think it's important to bring in people who have like a higher level of education and focus on the research aspect of things?
Because this technology is kind of cutting edge, right? It's never been done before. Blockchains are only about 12 years old, right? So it first began in 2009 with Bitcoin, and more recently in terms of like smart contracts, it's only really started in 2014, 2015 with the release of Ethereum. So this technology is very new and very cutting edge. But at the same time, it does take into account a lot of principles of computer science that people have studied about in the past. So for example, distributed computing, how do you get consensus or communicate across multiple nodes in the network or computers in the network? This sort of research has actually gone back many decades, probably to like the 1970s or 1980s. But the real innovation of Bitcoin has been adopting like the different technologies that are out there and putting it together into like one economic system where you're able to basically like incentivize people to like secure the network. And this sort of like cutting edge research requires people with like certain levels of expertise. So for example, on the middleware team, we've got like 4 people on the team, or 3 people at the moment. My old professor, Dr. Bernard Schultz, Professor Bernard Schultz from the University of Sydney, he has a very strong background in programming languages and virtual machines. It's basically been his whole like research career, and also his career in industry, working at Oracle and other companies like Sun Microsystems. And so someone like him and the people around him who also have the background in programming languages really have a lot of knowledge as to like how you execute computer programs. And a smart contract is essentially a computer program that executes on the ledger. And so in order for you to apply the sort of security properties that have been developed when it comes to, for example, like securing like aircraft or securing spacecraft or other like mission critical like healthcare software, you want to take those skills and apply them to smart contracts. Because smart contracts are also mission critical software, because if there's a single bug in the smart contract, it can cause millions of dollars to just suddenly be stolen or to be frozen in the contract, and we've seen that time and time again. So that's why it's really important to have these sort of like experts on board.
Understood. Well, that's great. And so other than doing research on smart contracts, is there any other focus that you currently have within the organization?
Yeah, so the other technical focus has been on the consensus or the transaction processing. So this is another like area of cutting edge research that you've seen a tremendous amount of development in. As I mentioned before, began with Bitcoin and then Ethereum and then multiple layer ones, including Fantom, that have kind of like found different ways of achieving consensus and doing it in like an efficient manner. And so for Fantom, it's about how do we like increase the network throughput of the chain, because that's how you're able to get more users and lower the gas fees per user as well. So we're working on multiple developments in order to have that happen. So for example, we're focusing on like experimenting with different like databases, different ways of communicating peer-to-peer between the nodes to speed up the communication, and a variety of different aspects as well. And if we're able to like, each of those improvements will increase the network throughput, or can also has the potential to lower the time to finality, or how long it takes to confirm transactions on the network. And all of that basically leads to a better user experience. And that's what it's really about in the end. As I've repeatedly said on many interviews, it's all about faster transactions, cheaper transactions, more secure transactions. That's what all the technology is designed to do, to kind of achieve a better user experience.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that and understand that, especially within the space since it's so nascent and new. That's definitely something that's very important. And so for where should people be looking for you, and what are your, what is the way that they can interact with your community?
The best way to interact with us is to follow us on Twitter at Fantom FDN. So at Fantom FDN, we push out like the latest kind of like content and also research there. So whenever, for example, there's like a new upgrade, we will first post it there, like on Twitter publicly. When there's projects that are deployed on Fantom or new releases of projects that are on Fantom, we also tweet them out. So that's usually our best form of communication. But also our website, fantom.foundation, has a lot of information on, for example, the team, the technology, some more technical resources, also links to other like socials, like on Discord, on Telegram, on Twitter, and elsewhere, as well as our blog. So I'll really like go to research. Our resource is fantom.foundation, and our Twitter is at fantomfdn.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for your time today. I'm excited to see what's going to continue happening within what you're doing in the space. I think it's absolutely important to have audits. Like you said, if things go wrong, this could be smart contracts can end up being a very costly thing, and it's definitely an issue. And it's not like you can go back and recall. You know, it has to be done well from the outset. But what I'm also curious about, it sounds like you're really looking at optimization of these smart contracts. So
yes, that's right. Yeah, it's both optimization and security. So you're absolutely right in what you talk about. Like, my professor would always tell me that the reason why it's important to look at smart contracts is because it is mission critical software, and it has to be treated with the same respect as if you're building software for an aircraft or you're building software for a spacecraft or anything that's mission critical, in that you cannot accept any failures, not even the smallest kind, because we've seen in the past like smart contracts have even a single bug, and $200 million, it gets frozen on chain. We saw that, for example, with a bug in the Parity multisig wallet back in November of 2017. I remember that well because we studied that vulnerability and had to deal with a single line of code. And so for us, that's why it's very important that we build better software to make it easier for people to write more secure smart contracts, as well as be able to execute the smart contracts much more efficiently. Because when you execute a smart contract, the more complicated the smart contract transaction, the more computation it requires, not just of like one computer, but amongst all computers in the network. So the more that you optimize the execution of a smart contract, the vast improvement that you get in terms of the entire network performance. Because that's one of the disadvantages of distributed ledgers, that you have to repeat the execution across multiple computers rather than just like a single computer.
And have you ever considered having the execution off-chain before it gets on-chain?
It's not really possible with smart contracts unless you find a kind of like a interesting way of doing it via zero knowledge proofs. But that's very, very difficult and experimental. We don't really know if that will work. So right now you do have to do the computation on-chain, but you can make it a lot more efficient. However, I think in the longer run, the way you kind of like we achieve what we call like infinite scalability. In other words, like achieve scalability where we can get as many users as use the internet using blockchain technology is via like sharding. And so with sharding, if you can break up the computation across like different parts of the network, and they can maintain security across the entire network for all transactions, then that's like really, really ideal. But that's something that's very difficult to achieve. It's something that we're also looking at. It's especially difficult for us to achieve because we process transactions a bit differently than say how Bitcoin and Ethereum do it, because we process them what we call asynchronously or multiple transactions at the same time. And so in order to maintain consistency, it's very, very difficult. That's how I think you achieve infinite scalability. But again, like working on like smart contract optimization, working on the other optimizations I've talked about are also very, very important aspects, because even with like much more like efficient system like with sharding, you still want to sort out the inefficiencies that would still apply to that sort of system, if that makes sense. So like doing the computation off chain might be possible. I'm just not really sure about it at the moment, actually.
Okay.
Because executing zero knowledge proofs also requires a lot of computation itself on chain. That's a disadvantage right now.
Understood. Well, thank you so much for all of that. I think you've left the audience with a lot to think about. So thank you for your time again today, and we look forward to any further updates. As he said, you can go to the website as well as their Twitter. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time as well. Really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, guys.
Wonderful.